Hello, man makers. Happy Friday. Back to another Tula Pink butterfly block. Today is the small wheel block, and I am teaching you an applique version. So there is the pieced curve version. I am avoiding that one, and I have created for you guys instead an applique version. Nice, clean, I'm not fighting any curves. So I'm going to show you this version for today. If you want me to show you how to piece curves on a machine, I can. Just let me know. Otherwise, this one was easy peasy. So this is probably going to be a little bit longer, so hang tight. But hopefully it'll be worth it in the end because it's pretty stress-free as far as I'm concerned. So what you start out with, and I'll get you measurements, is creating half square triangle blocks. And so to do that, the method I use is where I just take two squares, put them right sides together, draw a line, and so 1/4 inch from either side of the line, right? That's how I generally do it, especially for this because I used a lot of different colors, and this gets me both wing blocks done at the same time. So it's pretty efficient for this block because you're only making two, which is really cool. So once you cut apart your half square triangle, it'll look like that, right? Okay, you're going to make them. My block, if you noticed, has 8 colors. So I have a lot of different color combos. I then put them in their little rainbow order. Okay, so you make your half square triangle blocks and you put them together so they make what I would consider a pinwheel. So make sure the diagonal is always coming to the center. If you put 4 of these together and they don't all come to the center, you're not going to have the pie look that this has. Okay, so that's the key piece, is making sure when you put those half square triangles together, they actually are creating that pie wheel that you need for this block. Because it's really easy to get a half square triangle turned the wrong way. So focus on that. Make sure you pay attention to that. What I start out with for my squares to turn into half square triangles, gotta love I talk with my hands, and I'm very squirrely today, is a 5.5 inch square of each color. So I had 8 colors, 8 5.5 inch squares, and I paired them up in twos. And then each one of them got me 2 half square triangles. So I had one for each side. So you make 2 piles, okay? And then my background, what I did is this block is supposed to be 10.5 when it's done. I cut an 11-inch block because sometimes applique kind of will suck in the fabric. So to make sure that you still had 10.5 inches when you were done, I made my square just a little bit bigger. And it is just one square. I didn't piece anything. It's just one whole square. I have another one somewhere. Okay. So you know me, I do things a little bigger so that I have room to trim and play with and not be frustrated in the end. Once you do your half square triangles, I would trim them down to 5 inches. I like having just nice clean edges so the pies are all nice and consistent. So start out 5.5, trim it down to 5. If it's not quite 5, then trim it to, you can even go like 4 3/4 because I believe we need 4.5. So make your half square triangle unit, put it in your little rainbow like this. Then what I did is I created my own pie wedge template. I will trace it and scan it and email it to you guys so you have my version. If you want to make your own, what I did is I took template D. If you can notice, I cut off the extra seam allowance that she gave you because that's already being sewn into these blocks. So you don't need to have extra on the edges, but I left the seam allowance on the top because we're going to take a stabilizer and stitch a 1/4 inch around on the top. So if you want to make your own, you do this, and then I just traced it twice onto a piece of paper to make a pie wedge. But I'll trace it and send it to you guys, save you some effort, okay? So then, my stabilizer. Using Taylor, really doesn't matter. It's just a single-sided fusible stabilizer. Taylor is just a nice one because it has a nice soft side. I folded into quarters. That's all I did. So I started out with, what did I start out with? A 9-inch square. So take a stabilizer of your choice, fusible on one side if you're doing this method. Cut a 9-inch square, fold it into quarters. So my fold is here. So this is folded and this is folded, and I even wrote it on my template. These are the sides the fold go on, and then I pinned it. What I'm just going to do is take my lovely scissors, and I'm just going to hand cut the stabilizer on the edge of that pie template. For template D is what we're working with. Oh, and I forgot to tell you. Yeah, see, I'm super squirrely today. I'm not going to teach the large wheel block. I have it on the schedule for a couple weeks from now, but it's the same as this one, I realized after the fact. So today's really the small wheel and the large wheel block. We're just going to combine them. So I'm actually kind of creating an extra week for you to play catch up in the end, because they truly are the same block, just two different sizes. And I'll try to get you templates for everything, and it's just 2 blocks of each. So we're just going to get you through things that much faster, right? Yay! So I'm going to unpin my stabilizer. I'm going to hold on my pins because I'm going to need them. Okay, set my template aside. Okay, what's nice is this stabilizer now kind of has crease marks through the midsection. So I'm going to line those up in the cross midsections of this, and I'm going to pin it real quick, and I'll show you what I mean, so it all makes sense. Now I am, keep in mind, placing the fusible side of this stabilizer down, but do not fuse it. Don't put an iron to it. And I am putting it on the top side, the right side of the fabric of this half square triangle 4-patch, essentially is what it is. Okay, so fusible side down. Can we see what we did? Here we go. All right, so it's essentially centered in the middle of my fabric unit here. So right sides are out, fusible sides down. I'm not ironing it. All I'm going to do is take it to my machine and sew it 1/4 inch around the edges. So if you've ever sewn anything circular or round, you do have to stop, kind of lift your foot and keep shifting your fabric at the same time, because otherwise it will like to bunch up. So the nice thing about having a freehand system, and we're going to see if I can move this so you can see a little better, maybe, is that my knee bar is going to allow me to stop and pick up the foot and release that pressure as I'm going. So it just makes it a little easier. But otherwise, if you have a regular machine, just stop, lift the foot, and just kind of keep pivoting and playing with it, just so it doesn't crease over on itself and those kinds of things. And I'm not winning the battle with the camera today, but we'll see. Maybe. Maybe not. Sometimes I like to get creative, and it doesn't do it any better. Haha. Nope. I'm so glad you guys put up with me. Hi, Millie. Thanks for joining me. 1/4 inch seam, so I'm just using my 97 foot on this guy, and I'm just going to go around and stop. Nice thing is it's fairly forgiving. If you don't do a 1/4 inch, it's not really going to know, because it's going to be taken into that when you turn it and flip it. So as long as you're staying in a round motion, it doesn't really know whether you're 1/4 inch or not. So I'm just stopping, taking out pins, and lifting the foot and just pivoting kind of as I go, so that it all will behave in the end. It doesn't get all puckery on me. If you have a problem with your foot pushing too much, you might, if you can adjust your foot pressure, a lot of times it's on the side or on your screen, depending on the machine you have. You can release your foot pressure a little bit, and that will make it easier for you to turn. So if you are having kind of a struggle, check and see if you can change your foot pressure and just ease it up a little bit. Might make it a little easier. Just make sure you put it back down to the normal setting when you're done and you're ready to go back to piecing and quilting. Otherwise your fabric can get away from you because you just don't have enough pressure to keep it under control. Okay, so the beauty of this is that I'm really only cutting this circular template the one time for the stabilizer. Now that it's sewn, the stabilizer is now acting as my template. So we'll show you nice. Okay, so just 1/4 inch seam all the way around in a circular motion. And then you just take your scissors. I don't do this often, but for this scenario, you're not really going to see how it looks. So it doesn't matter how cleanly you cut. Just make sure you have good sharp scissors. Don't try to be doing it with the little tiny snips or you'll be there all day long. If you're good with your rotary cutter and just freehand cutting, you can do that also. It's whatever gets the job done. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to clip every, say, 2 inches around. So I'm only going to clip just a little bit in the seam, and I'll show you when I go do it. But what that will do is make it easier for the curves to give and not pucker. They won't bulk up as much when you give just little slits in the seam for it to breathe and twist and move. So I'll show you as soon as I'm done fighting this. As you can tell, I don't hand cut a lot. I may not have passed that in kindergarten very well, but we're getting it done. This is why I said this today's demo was going to be a little longer than most, purely just for some of these steps that we have to do that just take a little longer. But in the end, I think it's worth it because I'd much rather do this than actual machine curve piecing and fight with it and have to worry about whether or not my block comes out the right size, if it gets puckers. I just don't always have the best success with curve piecing. So if I can find a way to not do it, that's what I do. So I can usually take little snips or just even carefully with my regular scissors. What you do is just in the seam allowance, do a little snip if my scissors will do it. Try not to cut through the actual seam, but just do these little, it's always interesting trying to do it kind of upside down and backwards. And so just kind of clip through. And that way just gives it a little, you can do either side of the seam if you're worried about the seam. Just do these little snips. There's really no such thing as too many, in my opinion. I mean, if you want to do every inch, you can just go all the way around, okay? So it just gives them room. So once I try to turn it inside out, they'll kind of give and take on each other. And then what you can do is try to grab just the stabilizer, separate it, just make a little tent, put a snip in it. Then that way you can cut an opening in the stabilizer. And so I just cut kind of like those tortilla warmers, just a slit down the middle. Doesn't have to be pretty because nobody's going to see it. So I'm just opening it up and then flipping it around. Okay. And then I just gently, because the stabilizer is still somewhat sensitive. It's not quite like a pure cotton. So I then I run my finger to make sure I get the seam so that the fabric is the only thing that shows, and I'm trying to get that stabilizer to make sure that it's rolled to the back side so that when I press it down, I'm not really seeing stabilizer. I can see a little bit on my one circle, I'm not super worried about it. Because from a distance and once it's quilted, nobody's really going to know. And then if you really want to make sure, you could use like OSD point turner tool and just run it along the inside just to make sure that it's going the way you want. Kind of pull it in, press things out, make it a nice pretty circle. Then what you're going to do is center it onto the background. So what I have done, and I'll show you in just a minute, is I folded my background into quarters and ironed it so I can just kind of see the crease. I moved it on myself. So background, you can see the quadrants. That way, when I go to line up this guy, my little pizza guy, I can also line up my quadrants on the line so that everything stays nice and centered. And then the biggest discussion for yourself in your head is deciding which pie you want to start where. So that when you do both of them, you can make sure that, you know, I have the yellow here and the green there. It'll look the same on the next one. So all I'm going to do is line up. I can pin it if I want. I'm going to pin it so I can show you what it looks like. So you get an idea of what I'm talking about. And then be picky because I didn't quite do it. And what's nice is if you're cutting the fabric a little bit big, you have some room for forgiveness, which makes it a little easier. So all I did was make sure that like this center seam is lined up with the fold that I made with the iron here, and that this side seam is laid with this line from this fold, this side seam with this line from this fold, and the same on the bottom. So those are the markers that I'm using to line everything up. That way it'll stay nice and centered. Okay, and then because now the fusible side is out on that stabilizer, you take it to your ironing board and press it. Easy peasy. And I press mine with steam, with heat, and just go straight down. Once again, don't do any pushing because you don't need it shifting to a direction you don't want it to go. So just straight up, straight down, because you have it laid where you want it. Get my steam to kick in here because I haven't used it for a minute. And then just iron. So, and if it's not quite sticking, just hold it down a little bit longer, let it sit there until it actually sticks for you. So it takes a couple minutes depending on the stabilizer you use because this is a little thicker. Mine's not working at all. I'm going to give it a minute. But once you do that, all you're going to do is applique it down. So that'll be your other choice to do. Depending on how you feel, I just did a straight stitch. I like a top stitch. So I lengthened my stitch to 2.9, and then I had a rainbow variegated thread because who doesn't, right? And top stitched it down, and I'll show you. Because I decided that would be more fun than gray. So in some spots of it, it's a little darker. Some spots you don't really see it at all. And that's just how the variegated ended up. It's kind of fun. Like I said, once you put it in the quilt and it's up on a wall and it's quilted all over, nobody's really going to know. So if you want to just use neutral thread, if you want to use clear monofilament, that's always an option. Then you don't have to worry about the thread being seen at all. If you use a monofilament, I do recommend you're going to drop your tension. I love monofilament. I usually don't have problems with it. I use a regular cotton in the bottom, the monofilament on top, but you gotta drop that top tension all the way down to like 1, you know, or almost 0, because otherwise it will pull, and that monofilament is a very stretchy thread. And once it releases after being pulled, it likes to pucker things up, and then nobody's happy. And I always test drive it. Once I thread my machine with monofilament, I take scrap fabric and I test out my stitch before I take it to my project. So I don't have to worry about how it's going to look once I start on my project, because it's a pain to pull out and you just don't want that headache. So just top stitch, you can do what they call a buttonhole stitch, a satin stitch, decorative stitch, whatever you want, just making sure that it's going to catch enough of the edge to keep it down. Okay, that's all you're doing so that it's not flying away. And then you're going to make the center circle the same way, only easier. You're just going to make your stabilizer in a circle on one plain piece of fabric. This is where you can take the time, if you have something fun, like I'm going to have the little swallow in the middle, like I did this guy. So this is where you can have some fun, fussy cut things for those centers. But I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch all the way around, trim it, pop it open, flip it, press it on, stitch it down. Easy peasy. Oh, yes, Diane. So if you're using nylon thread, so monopoly, monofilament, which is what I use as a clear thread, will not melt. You can put an iron and press on it and it will not melt and disappear. I believe Aurifil monofilament is not heat resistant. So yes, please be careful of the monofilament or nylon thread that you use. If you're using, you know, sulky mix, some really sparkly, shiny threads and those kinds of things, you can get all kinds of crazy. But definitely make sure it's not one that melts. So thanks, Diane. That is a good point to make. Once you get into fancy threads, yeah, you just want to be careful because, yeah, if you accidentally put an iron and it melts all over, not a good time. So just be careful of that. But monopoly, which is the monofilament we carry, is heat resistant and you're safe with that one. But otherwise, you're just making 2 of these guys. And then I'm going to encourage you to do the same with the large wheel because it's the exact same process, the exact same thing, only a little bit bigger. And just knock those blocks out and be done. And then we're down to the pie block. So we're not here next Friday for Thanksgiving weekend because I'm going to eat pie, not make pie. But we'll be back the first Friday in December. On the 4th, I'll show you the pie block, and then at that point, we'll be done. So if you're behind on other blocks, feel free. Use all next week to do some catch up so that once you do those pie blocks, you're ready for assembly, because the week after that, we'll talk about actually putting this guy together. It's going to be a lot of fun because we're going to go in sections and get them all together and start seeing all our masterpieces come together in the end. And of course, if you decide to make changes along the way, like I might, who knows, because I don't have a design wall, so I'm winging it. You'll have time to do that, but it'll be fun to start to see all these butterflies kind of take flight and come together, and everybody's color choices. What I've seen so far has been fabulous. So thanks for those of you that have been sharing. I love it. And as always, if you have questions, reach out to me. I'm still around, even though I'm taking some time off for Thanksgiving to eat too much pie and at least hang with my kids at home, my husband, and the obnoxious dogs. I'm still around. So you can always email me or call me at the shop early in the week and I'll gladly help you out. We can video chat, whatever you need. And of course, I'll hop into a room after this if you have any questions right now and we'll go over it. But otherwise, I'll get you some templates so you can see what I did. I'll put some notes in there as to the measurements for the squares that I cut, because of course we're not following the pattern because we're not sewing curves. Nobody likes that. Well, okay, some people do. That's okay. But we're doing an applique version. So, and for the pie block, I am going to show you an applique version for that also to avoid curve piecing because they're small. They're small blocks, and small curve piecing really can be stressful. So we'll give you an applique version for that one too. So otherwise, I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving and a great weekend this weekend. I'm seeing a little bit of sunshine finally, and so it makes me happy. And you just take care. Keep on stitching.